The gunshot cracked through the evening air as Daisy Bramwell ducked behind the church steps, clutching her worn Bible against her chest. Dodge City in 1878 was no place for a woman alone, especially one who refused to hide her faith in a town where saloons outnumbered houses of worship 3-1. "Lord, please guide me through this darkness," she prayed aloud, her voice carrying just enough to reach the ears of the three men stumbling out of the Lucky Strike saloon across the dusty street. "Well, would you listen to that?" one of them slurred, pointing in Daisy's direction. "Got ourselves a holy roller." Daisy tried to make herself smaller against the weathered wood of the church steps. At 22, she had already faced more hardship than most women twice her age. Orphaned at 16 when influenza swept through her hometown in Missouri, she had come west on the promise of work as a school teacher, only to arrive in Dodge City and find the position filled. "Why don't you pray a little louder, lady? Maybe the good Lord's hard of hearing tonight," another man shouted, generating cruel laughter from his companions. Daisy rose to her feet, clutching her Bible tighter. "I will not be ashamed of my faith," she said, though her voice quavered. 6 months in Dodge City working as a seamstress had taught her that showing fear only invited more trouble. The men started crossing the street toward her, their boots kicking up dust in the fading light. "Let's see if your God can protect you from some fun," the tallest one called out, his hand resting on his belt in a way that made Daisy's heart pound with fear. "Step away from the lady." The deep voice came from behind Daisy, steady and commanding. She turned to see a man standing in the shadow of the church, his tall frame silhouetted against the building. As he stepped forward, the dying sunlight revealed a weather-beaten face beneath a wide-brimmed hat, eyes as blue as a summer sky, and a determined set to his jaw. "This ain't your business, Wade," one of the troublemakers called out. "I'm making it my business," Wade replied, moving to stand beside Daisy. "Miss, are you all right?" Daisy nodded, unable to find her voice as the stranger positioned himself between her and the three men. "You turning preacher now, Forrester?" the tall one sneered. "Never figured you for the religious type." Wade Forrester, for that, seemed to be his name, didn't flinch. "I respect a person's right to worship as they please, Harkins. Something you might consider trying." The man named Harkins spat in the dirt. "She was disturbing the peace with that praying nonsense." "The only ones disturbing the peace are you three," Wade said evenly. "Now move along before I decide to inform Sheriff Masterson about that cattle-rustling business last month." The threat hung in the air for a moment before Harkins gestured to his companions. "Come on, boys, not worth our time." As they retreated back toward the saloon, Wade turned to Daisy. "I apologize for their behavior, miss." "Thank you for your help, Mr. Forrester," Daisy said, finally finding her voice. "I'm Daisy Bramwell." "Wade Forrester," he confirmed with a slight tip of his hat. "I don't believe I've seen you in Dodge City before." "I've been here 6 months, working for Mrs. Hendricks at the dress shop," Daisy explained. "I usually attend evening prayer service, but Pastor Williams is ill tonight." Wade nodded, looking at the empty church behind them. "So, you came to pray alone?" "God hears us wherever we are," Daisy said simply. A ghost of a smile touched Wade's lips. "I suppose he does." He glanced back toward the saloon where the men had disappeared. "May I walk you home, Miss Bramwell? Those men might think twice about bothering you, but I wouldn't put it past them to try again once they've had more whiskey." Daisy hesitated only a moment before nodding. "I would appreciate that, Mr. Forrester." They walked in silence for several blocks, the bustle of Front Street fading behind them as they moved toward the quieter residential area. Daisy lived in a small room behind Mrs. Hendricks' shop, modest but clean and safe most of the time. "Have those men bothered you before?" Wade asked finally. Daisy sighed. "Not those particular men, but I've grown accustomed to comments. People in Dodge City seem uncomfortable with open displays of faith." "This town was built by men running from something," Wade observed. "Law, responsibilities, or their past. Religion reminds them of what they've left behind." "And what are you running from, Mr. Forrester?" The question slipped out before Daisy could stop herself. Wade's step faltered for just a moment. "What makes you think I'm running from anything?" "Just an observation," Daisy replied quietly. "You seem to understand the mind of a runner." They reached the back entrance to Mrs. Hendricks' shop before Wade could respond. In the glow of the lantern hanging by the door, Daisy could see his features more clearly. The tiny scar above his right eyebrow, the lines around his eyes that spoke of long days in the sun, and something else, a sadness perhaps, that tugged at her heart. "Thank you again for your kindness," Daisy said, unlocking her door. Wade nodded. "Will you be attending church tomorrow morning?" "Of course," Daisy replied. "Every Sunday." "Perhaps I'll see you there," Wade said, surprising her. "Good night, Miss Bramwell." As he turned to leave, Daisy called after him. "Mr. Forrester?" When he looked back, she continued, "I'll pray for you tonight." For a moment, Wade looked as though he might say something more, but instead, he simply nodded and disappeared into the darkness. True to his word, Wade appeared at the small church the next morning, clean-shaven and wearing what appeared to be his best shirt. Daisy noticed him from her usual pew near the front, watching as he awkwardly removed his hat and took a seat at the back of the church. Throughout the service, Daisy found her attention wandering to the cowboy at the back. He sat straight and attentive, though she could tell from his occasional shifting that he was unaccustomed to spending time in a church pew. After the service, Daisy made her way through the small congregation, nodding and smiling at familiar faces until she reached Wade, who was standing uncertainly near the door. "I'm glad you came, Mr. Forrester," she said with a genuine smile. "Been some time since I attended a service," he admitted. "Pastor Williams gives a fine sermon." "He does," Daisy agreed. "Would you care to join me for dinner? Mrs. Hendricks always makes enough Sunday roast for an army, and she's invited me to bring a guest if I ever wished." Something like surprise flickered across Wade's face before he nodded. "I'd be honored, Miss Bramwell." Mrs. Hendricks, a plump widow in her 50s with shrewd eyes and a kind heart, welcomed Wade with open curiosity. "So, you're the cowboy who came to our Daisy's rescue," she said as she ushered them to her dining table. "Been wondering when she'd bring someone to Sunday dinner." "Mrs. Hendricks?" Daisy protested, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. "Oh, hush, child. A handsome man escorting you to church is cause for comment in this town." The older woman winked at Wade. "Especially one with a reputation like yours, Mr. Forrester." Wade cleared his throat. "I hope my reputation hasn't caused you concern, madam." Mrs. Hendricks laughed heartily. "Concern? A man known for being the fastest gun west of the Mississippi sitting in church? I'd say it's cause for celebration." Daisy looked at Wade with new eyes. "Fastest gun?" "Former," Wade corrected quickly. "I hung up that particular skill some time ago." "After that business in Abilene, if the stories are true," Mrs. Hendricks added, clearly enjoying herself as she served up generous portions of roast beef and potatoes. Wade's expression closed off slightly. "Stories tend to grow with the telling, madam." Sensing his discomfort, Daisy changed the subject. "Mr. Forrester, what brings you to Dodge City?" "I bought a small spread about 10 miles out of town," he explained, seeming grateful for the shift in conversation. "Nothing fancy, but enough to raise some decent horses." "A horse ranch?" Daisy's interest was genuine. "I've always loved horses." "Do you ride, Miss Bramwell?" "I did, back in Missouri. My father bred carriage horses before." She trailed off, the memory of her parents' deaths still painful after all these years. Wade nodded in understanding. "Perhaps you'd like to visit the ranch sometime. I have a mare that might suit you." "I'd like that," Daisy replied softly. Mrs. Hendricks watched this exchange with undisguised interest. "Well now, isn't that nice? Daisy hardly ever takes a day off. Perhaps next Saturday?" "The shop is closed then?" "Mrs. Hendricks," Daisy protested again, embarrassed by her employer's transparent matchmaking. Wade, however, seemed amused. "Saturday would be fine, if Miss Bramwell is agreeable." And so, it was arranged. The following Saturday, Wade arrived with a wagon to collect Daisy, who had spent an unreasonable amount of time selecting a suitable riding outfit from the shop's inventory. The ride to Wade's ranch passed quickly as Daisy discovered that the quiet cowboy could be quite talkative when discussing horses. His 10-mile spread was modest by Kansas standards, but meticulously maintained. A small but sturdy house stood near a barn and corral where several horses grazed peacefully. "It's lovely," Daisy said sincerely, as Wade helped her down from the wagon. "It's home," Wade replied simply. "But there was pride in his voice. He introduced her to a gentle chestnut mare named Penny, and soon they were riding across the open prairie, the summer sun warm on their backs. Daisy felt a freedom she hadn't experienced since leaving Missouri, the rhythm of the horse beneath her both familiar and exhilarating. "You ride well," Wade observed as they stopped to rest by a small creek. "Your father taught you?" "Yes," Daisy smiled at the memory. "He said a proper lady should be able to handle a horse as well as a needlepoint." "He sounds like a wise man." "He was." Daisy trailed her fingers in the cool water. "They both were my parents. I miss them every day." Wade was quiet for a moment. "I lost my parents young too. Father to a Comanche raid when I was 10. Mother to pneumonia 2 winters later." "I'm so sorry," Daisy said softly. "Who raised you after?" "My uncle for a time. Then I was on my own by 16. Wade picked up a small stone and skipped it across the water. "Learned to shoot, found I had a talent for it, became the thing people feared or hired, depending on their needs." Daisy studied his profile as he stared at the water. "And now? Now I'm trying to build something that doesn't require a gun," he said, "something that might last." The honesty in his voice touched something in Daisy. "Is that why you came to church?" Wade turned to look at her then, his blue eyes serious. "I came because I wanted to understand what gives you the courage to pray openly in a town like Dodge." "Faith isn't about courage," Daisy said thoughtfully. "It's about trust. Trusting that there's something greater than ourselves, guiding us even when the path seems dark. And if you can't see that path, then you trust those who can, until your own way becomes clear." Wade seemed to consider this as they mounted their horses and began the ride back to the ranch. By the time they returned, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the land. "Stay for supper?" Wade asked as he helped Daisy from her horse. "It won't be as fine as Mrs. Hendrick's cooking, but I make a decent stew." Daisy accepted and found herself sitting at Wade's simple kitchen table as he moved with surprising competence around the small space. The stew was indeed good, rich with vegetables from his garden and tender beef. "You're full of surprises, Mr. Forrester," Daisy commented as they ate. "I wouldn't have expected a former gunslinger to grow his own vegetables or cook such a fine meal." Wade's smile was slow but genuine. "A man alone has to feed himself somehow. And please, call me Wade." "Wade," she repeated, liking how the name felt. "Then you must call me Daisy." As darkness fell, Wade lit a lantern and they sat on the porch, talking of horses and books and life in Dodge City. When it came time to return to town, Daisy found herself reluctant to leave the peace of the ranch and the company of this complex man, who seemed to reveal a new facet of himself with each conversation. The following weeks established a pattern. Wade attended church each Sunday, sitting progressively closer to Daisy's pew. Afterward, they would share dinner with Mrs. Hendricks, whose matchmaking became less subtle with each passing week. On Saturdays, Daisy would visit the ranch, riding Penny across the prairie or helping Wade with small tasks around the property. Their friendship deepened, but Wade maintained a certain reserve that Daisy couldn't quite penetrate. She knew there was more to his past than he had revealed, shadows that sometimes darkened his eyes when certain topics arose. One evening in late August, they sat on Wade's porch watching a spectacular sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The air was thick with the promise of a summer storm, distant thunder rumbling across the plains. "Harvest Dance is coming up next month," Wade said suddenly. "Would you consider attending with me?" Daisy turned to him in surprise. The Harvest Dance was the social event of the season in Dodge City, a rare opportunity for the community to gather in celebration rather than at a funeral or in church. "I'd be delighted," she answered, trying to contain the flutter of excitement in her chest. Wade nodded, seeming pleased but still oddly tense. "Daisy, there's something I should—" A crack of thunder interrupted whatever he had been about to say, followed immediately by a deluge of rain that had them both scrambling into the house, laughing as they shook water from their clothes. "That came on fast," Daisy said, accepting the towel Wade offered her. "I suppose I won't be returning to town tonight." Wade looked momentarily alarmed. "I can sleep in the barn. You take the bed." "Don't be ridiculous," Daisy replied practically. "The barn will leak in this storm. I'll be fine on a chair by the fire. In the end, Wade insisted on taking the floor while Daisy had the bed. As she lay awake listening to the rain pound against the roof and the occasional rumble of thunder, Daisy found herself wondering what Wade had been about to tell her before the storm interrupted. The morning dawned clear and fresh, the storm having washed the world clean. Wade was already up when Daisy emerged from the bedroom, cooking breakfast and looking oddly nervous. "Sleep well?" he asked, not quite meeting her eyes. "Very well, thank you," Daisy replied, sensing his discomfort. "Is everything all right, Wade?" He hesitated, then gestured for her to sit. "What I was trying to tell you last night, there's something you should know about me before we attend the dance together." Daisy waited, her heart suddenly pounding with apprehension. "You've heard rumors about my reputation," Wade began slowly. "About Abilene. The truth is, I killed a man there. 3 men, actually." Daisy's breath caught, but she remained silent, allowing him to continue. "They were robbing the bank, took hostages, including a little girl." Wade stared at his hands. "I had a clear shot, so I took it. The papers called me a hero, but the killing, it does something to a man's soul. Is that why you left that life behind?" Wade nodded. "Came here to start fresh, but reputations follow. Some men see me as a challenge, others want to hire my gun. I've turned them all down, but there are those who won't take no for an answer," Daisy finished for him. "Yes." Wade finally looked up at her. "Being seen with me at the dance might invite unwanted attention. I wouldn't want to put you in danger." Daisy reached across the table and placed her hand over his. "I'm not afraid, Wade." "Maybe you should be," he said softly. "I've tried to leave violence behind, but sometimes it finds me anyway." "Then we'll face it together," Daisy said with a certainty that surprised even her. "I believe God brought you into my life for a reason." Wade's expression softened. "Your faith is a beautiful thing, Daisy. I wish I shared it." "Faith can grow," she told him, "like anything worth having." The weeks leading up to the harvest dance passed in a flurry of preparations. Mrs. Hendricks insisted on creating a special dress for Daisy, a rich burgundy creation that made her auburn hair shine like copper. Wade purchased a new shirt and had his best boots polished to a mirror shine. The night of the dance arrived crisp and clear, with stars scattered like diamonds across the velvet sky. The town hall had been transformed with autumn decorations, corn husks, pumpkins, and colorful leaves adorning every surface. A small band played lively tunes as couples twirled across the wooden floor. When Wade and Daisy entered, a momentary hush fell over the crowd before conversations resumed, now peppered with whispers and glances in their direction. Daisy held her head high, her hand resting on Wade's arm. "Quite the stir we're causing," she murmured. "Having second thoughts?" Wade asked, his voice tight with tension. "Not a single one," Daisy assured him, smiling up at him. "Shall we dance?" They moved onto the floor, and if Wade was nervous about the attention they were receiving, it didn't show in his dancing. He led Daisy confidently through a waltz, then a lively reel that left them both breathless and laughing. "Where did you learn to dance like that?" Daisy asked, as they paused for refreshments. "My mother insisted," Wade replied with a fond smile. "Said no son of hers would grow up to be a clumsy oaf on a dance floor." "I'm grateful to her wisdom," Daisy said, accepting a cup of punch from him. As she sipped, she noticed 3 men enter the hall, their expressions dark as they surveyed the crowd. Wade followed her gaze, his body tensing. "Trouble," he said under his breath. "Those are the Harkins brothers. The one in the middle is Jeb, the one who bothered you that night at the church." Before Daisy could respond, the brothers spotted Wade and began making their way across the room. Conversations died away as people sensed the building confrontation. "Forrester," Jeb Harkins called out, his voice carrying across the now silent hall. "Didn't expect to see you here with your praying woman." Wade positioned himself slightly in front of Daisy. "We're just here to enjoy the dance, Harkins. No need for trouble." "Heard you've gone soft," the younger Harkins brother sneered, "trading your gun for a Bible." "Nothing soft about finding peace," Wade replied evenly. "Why don't you boys go enjoy the punch and leave us be?" Jeb's hand twitched near his holster. "Maybe I don't feel like leaving. Maybe your lady friend there would like to dance with a real man instead of a has-been." Daisy stepped forward, ignoring Wade's attempt to keep her behind him. "Mr. Harkins, This is a community celebration. Surely we can all behave civilly for one evening. Jeb's eyes narrowed. There she goes again, preaching at folks. Tell me, does she pray before or after you bed her, Forrester? A dangerous stillness came over Wade, and Daisy could feel the change in him, like a storm gathering force. Apologize to the lady, Wade said, his voice soft, but carrying an unmistakable threat. Or what? Jeb challenged, his hand now resting openly on his gun. You'll shoot me? In front of all these good people? Prove you're still the killer from Abilene? Sheriff Masterson appeared then, his badge gleaming in the lantern light. That's enough, Harkins. This is a peaceful gathering. We were just leaving, the eldest Harkins brother said, grabbing Jeb's arm. Come on, Jeb, not worth it. For a tense moment, Jeb resisted, his eyes locked with Wade's. Then he spat on the floor and allowed his brothers to lead him away. The band struck up a tune as if nothing had happened, but the mood of the evening had shifted. People gave Wade and Daisy a wide berth, and whispers followed them wherever they went. Perhaps we should leave, Daisy suggested quietly. Wade nodded, his face grim as he escorted her outside. The night air had turned cold, and Daisy shivered in her fine dress. I'm sorry, Wade said, as he helped her into his wagon. I shouldn't have brought you. It wasn't your fault, Daisy insisted. Those men were looking for trouble. Wade was silent as they drove through town, but instead of heading toward Mrs. Hendricks's shop, he turned the wagon toward the church. Wade, there's something I need to do, he said, pulling up in front of the small building. Will you come inside with me? The church was dark and empty, lit only by the moonlight streaming through the windows. Wade led Daisy to a pew near the front, then sat beside her, removing his hat and holding it in his hands. I haven't prayed since I was a boy, he admitted. Not properly, but tonight, seeing how close I came to violence again, I need guidance, Daisy. Daisy's heart swelled with emotion. Would you like me to pray with you? Wade nodded. Would you pray aloud? I want to hear the words. Daisy took his hand and closed her eyes. Heavenly Father, we come to you tonight with grateful hearts for your protection and guidance. We ask for your wisdom as Wade seeks a path of peace in a world that often demands violence. Help him to know that your strength is made perfect in our weakness, and that your love can transform even the darkest parts of our past. As Daisy continued to pray, neither of them heard the church door open or the footsteps approaching until it was too late. Well, ain't this touching? Jeb Harkins slurred, clearly having continued drinking after leaving the dance. His two brothers stood behind him, looking uncomfortable, but making no move to stop him. The gunslinger and his praying woman. Wade was on his feet immediately. This is a house of God, Harkins. Take your grudge outside. You embarrassed me in front of the whole town, Jeb growled, swaying slightly. Made me look weak. You did that yourself, Wade replied. Now leave before you do something you'll regret. Jeb's hand moved to his gun. Too late for regrets, Forrester. No, Daisy cried, standing up. Please. There's been enough violence. Let us pray together instead. Ask for God's guidance. Jeb laughed harshly. Listen to her, still praying. What good did prayer ever do anyone? It brought me peace, Wade said quietly. Something you clearly need. I need you dead, Jeb snarled, drawing his gun with surprising speed. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion for Daisy. Wade pushed her down behind the pew as Jeb fired, the shot going wild and splintering the wood near Wade's head. There was a blur of movement as Wade tackled Jeb, both men crashing to the floor. Jeb's gun skittered away across the wooden planks. The other Harkins brothers moved forward, but Daisy was faster, placing herself in front of them. Stop this! This is God's house! Remarkably, they hesitated, perhaps sobered by the gunshot or by Daisy's fearless intervention. On the floor, Wade had pinned Jeb, holding the struggling man down. It's over, Jeb, Wade said firmly. I'm not going to fight you, and I'm not going to kill you, but I will protect what's mine. The church door burst open again as Sheriff Masterson arrived, drawn by the gunshot. What in tarnation is going on here? Attempted murder in a church, Wade said grimly, allowing the sheriff to haul Jeb to his feet. The Harkins brothers can explain it to you at the jail. As the sheriff led the three brothers away, promising a long stay behind bars, Wade turned to Daisy, his face pale with concern. "Are you hurt?" "No," she assured him, though she was trembling from the rush of fear and relief. "Are you?" Wade shook his head, then suddenly pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "I could have lost you, if his aim had been better." "But it wasn't," Daisy said, her voice muffled against his chest. "God was watching over us." Wade drew back slightly, looking into her eyes with an expression of wonder. "I believe you're right." He glanced around at the church, at the bullet hole in the pew where they had been sitting. "I think I'd like to finish that prayer." Daisy's eyes filled with tears as Wade led her back to the pew. This time, when she began to pray aloud, Wade's voice joined hers, uncertain at first, then with growing confidence. "Lord, thank you for your protection tonight," Wade prayed. "Thank you for bringing Daisy into my life, for showing me that there's more to strength than a fast draw. Help me to be the man she deserves, the man you created me to be." When they finished praying, Wade took both of Daisy's hands in his. "I love you, Daisy Bramwell. I think I have since that first night when you weren't afraid to pray out loud, even when it brought mockery." "I love you too," Daisy whispered, joy bubbling through her veins. "I don't have much to offer," Wade continued, "just a small ranch and a heart that's trying to learn faith. But if you'd consider becoming my wife—" "Yes," Daisy answered without hesitation. 1,000 times, yes. Their kiss, gentle and reverent in the quiet church, sealed a promise that would withstand the tests of time and the harsh realities of the frontier. They were married 2 months later in the same church, with Mrs. Hendricks weeping happily in the front pew and most of Dodge City in attendance. Even Sheriff Masterson came, commenting that he never thought he'd see the day when Wade Forrester would be standing at an altar for any reason other than a funeral. The following spring, Daisy planted a garden around their ranch house, while Wade expanded the stables to accommodate their growing herd. Every evening, they would sit on the porch and watch the sunset, and every night, they would pray together, Wade's deep voice joining Daisy's in thanksgiving for the life they were building. And if travelers passing by the Forrester Ranch on a Sunday evening happened to hear prayers floating on the evening breeze, they would often pause and add their own silent amen before continuing on their way, touched by the sound of faith spoken boldly in a land where such things were all too rare. 5 years later, the ranch had prospered, and so had the Forresters. 2 children, a boy with Wade's blue eyes and a girl with Daisy's auburn hair, played in the yard under the watchful eye of their parents. The church in Dodge City had grown too, with Wade serving as a deacon and Daisy teaching Sunday school. And each night, without fail, the family would gather for prayers, their voices rising together in the quiet of the prairie, evening unashamed, unafraid, and deeply in love with each other, and the God who had brought them together on that fateful night, when a brave woman prayed aloud and a reformed gunslinger found the courage to stand beside her proudly.